Is your medication helping or hurting you? Find out at drugsafetynews.com.
Wesley, Jerry Beasley really stepped up in trying this case over in St. Louis. And I say that because, you know, Jerry has a long history as being a really outstanding trial lawyer. This was a case where the government was not doing their job. They completely were asleep as far as regulations. The industry was not doing any kind of self-policing. They knew they had a problem as early as the 1980s, but they were unresponsive to doing any kind of policing at all. Then you had the media, which never really picked this story up because they were afraid of offending Johnson & Johnson, because Johnson & Johnson is such a big advertiser. So in that, Jerry Beasley stands forward, and he goes forward with this case, just gets a tremendous result in St. Louis. And I know you're handling these cases, and our firm's handling these cases, but I want to talk about the fact that sometimes it takes a Jerry Beasley to make everybody wake up and make everybody understand, have these women understand that they should not be using talcum powder, period. What is your take on this? How bad is the relationship between ovarian cancer and talcum powder, like the case that Jerry just tried?
Oh, there's no question. It is horrible. Every year there's about 21,000 cases of ovarian cancer diagnosed, and of those, about 14,000 deaths. So this is an incredibly serious disease, and of those 14,000 deaths, what came out in that last trial with Mr. Beasley was that about 10% of those, at least 10%, are related to talc powder use. So this is not an isolated incident. This isn't a one-off case. This is something that is affecting thousands upon thousands of women every year in our country.
Well, I know you've evaluated this case, and I think the reason that you think it's such a strong case is you're finding that there actually is remnants of the silica from the powder that's being found. The minerals are actually being found in the tumors that are being removed from women's bodies.
That's right.
I mean, that's kind of smoking gun kind of material, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. What they're seeing is that sometimes women will go in, they're having problems. Their doctors will actually see that their ovaries are inflamed, and they do what's known as a tissue digestion study. When they do that, a pathologist looks at the tissue underneath the microscope, and they're actually finding particles of talc in the ovaries around this inflammation and actually in the tumor themselves. So there's no question what's causing this. I mean, talc is actually getting into the ovaries, and it is causing cancer.
One thing these lawyers one thing that's developing here, and I think it's just so important, the International Journal on Gynecological Cancer came out with a fairly extensive study where they showed that there was a 30 to 60% increase in the risk of ovarian cancer for women who were using this powder. When did this kind of information start developing? When is it that Johnson & Johnson knew, or certainly could have known, that they needed to take a closer look at what was going on here?
Well, unfortunately, the answer to that, and I think what really got this jury so incensed, was that they've known since the 1980s. In fact, they started looking at the link in 1982. In the late 80s, even the government became aware of it. But what's really sad, and what's really the tragic part of this, is that because it's a cosmetic product, talcum powder is used in a wide variety of cosmetics, but because it's considered cosmetic, the FDA doesn't regulate it. They rely on Johnson & Johnson to essentially self-regulate, and of course, you know, that leads to disastrous results here, where they don't even put on there a warning when they've known about it. Their executives have been talking about it for decades, since the 1980s at least.
Wesley, what are you looking at when a case calls, when somebody calls and they say, I think there may be a case? What things are important for people to understand and be aware of when you're advising them? What types of things, what types of questions should you be asking?
Well, you know, and this type of case, it really is, what we're looking at are women who have used Johnson & Johnson products, talcum powder, baby powder, really any type of baby powder, consistently. You know, you had mentioned the study previously that showed a 30 to 60% increase. Harvard actually did a study in 2008, Harvard University, that said women that use talcum powder even just as little as once a week increase their risk by 36%. If you start using it daily, it jumps up to at least 41%. So, one of the things that we want to do is get the message out there that this is a dangerous product, because Johnson & Johnson isn't going to put a warning on their product. The FDA isn't going to regulate it. And so it's up to people, to lawyers, to take the right step, and like what Mr. Beasley did, and make sure this message gets out there. So when we look at these cases, we're looking at women who have used this product for years and that are now faced with a very tragic set of circumstances in their lives.
Even after the results that took place here, even after a jury looks across the room and tells Johnson & Johnson, that, by the way, I think it's remarkable, Shook Hardy's name pops up in here as being, I don't know if they're still defending him, but, Shook Hardy is, of course, the people who defended the tobacco industry. Mm-hmm. And I wonder what it takes to get through to these folks and say, listen, isn't it time you just take the product off the market? Why should you put anybody at risk? The risk-benefit, there is no risk-benefit analysis. I mean, you don't have to use baby powder. You don't have to use this product called Shower to Shower and put yourself at any kind of risk.
No, you can look for a product that contains cornstarch. A lot of manufacturers, not all, but a lot of manufacturers of a baby powder type of product have switched from talcum to cornstarch. But let me comment on what you just mentioned about what is it going to take for Johnson & Johnson to change what they're doing. I don't think that anything can change it. Let me read you something that Mr. Beasley put in his last trial. This is an internal memorandum. They had an investigator that they hired as a third party to look into this, and this is what he said. He said that, quoting a prior internal memorandum, he said that in that prior memorandum, it says, human studies on talc and cancer in the industry settings have shown that industrial exposure to talc, both by skin contact and inhalation, even at levels thousands of times higher than lifetime consumer exposures, present no significant risk. And here's the part that really drives it home. This investigator says this statement is outright false. That's in 1997. When you have your own investigator telling you that your statements are outright lies to the public and you don't change your conduct, I don't know what will.
Will you, going forward, Wesley, if people call, will you be willing to share the information that you have about this case? And so I think as much information as we can get out there, the better.
Absolutely.
All right. Wesley Bowden, thank you for joining me. Good luck with this, okay?
Thank you.